messed up, child. For those struggling with tinnitus, because some folks swear they heard freedom ring. After all of this time, I do not know what else to tell you. I have no excuse or reprieve for you, no empathy or sympathy for you. It's both below and above me now, with the ancestors. It does not compute how your forefathers read and repeated Moses' words commanding Pharaoh to let my people go, yet apparently eyes and ears did not see nor hear the parallels in the stories and were not moved to practice what they preached. That's because they used that same book to validate their manifest destiny, their supremacy. The lies they told are still the lies many tell. It just has the ring of a different bell and not the one Martin was waiting for to ring. Remember that whole freedom thing? Did it ring in 1863 when it was supposedly proclaimed? Did it ring in 1865 when they sent in the cavalry? Did it ring when Reconstruction was no longer a thing? Did it ring when Jim Crow came into being? Did it ring following the death and destruction of Black Wall Street? Did it ring when a young Emmett Till was lynched for supposedly whistling? Did it ring during the experiments of Tuskegee? Did it ring when Mississippi and Watts were burning? Did it ring during the Alabama church bombing? Did it ring after they extinguished Malcolm X and Martin Luther King? Did it ring when they turned Fred Hampton's home into Swiss cheese while laying next to the woman pregnant with his baby, Fred Hampton Jr., as we know him today? Did it ring when they dropped bombs in Philly? Did it ring for Mulugeta Sarah? Came to Portland from Ethiopia for college and was beaten to death by skinheads looking for mud people when they saw him being dropped off in front of his apartment. Did it ring when Los Angeles was again burning in response to the Rodney King ruling? Did it ring when Obama got elected to the presidency? And Portland, never forget that we have our own Eric Garner. Lloyd Tony Stevenson actually helped to stop a robbery, but instead it was him that was put into a sleeper hold. Remember, don't choke them, smoke them? Indeed, they did. And unfortunately, Deontay Keller, Kendra James, James Jahar Perez, and Aaron Campbell are no longer here today in person to attest to it. Did it ring following Mike Brown's killing, resulting in Black Lives Matter becoming a plea? Did it ring when the family of Trayvon Martin was felled and George Zimmerman went free? Did it ring when 12 years old Tamir Rice, playing alone in the park, was shot within 2 seconds after police arrived on the scene so fast that the police car had not yet come to a complete stop? Did it ring when Dylan Roof was taken to Burger King? Did it ring when Trump, with all of his inciting, made a mockery of the presidency? Did it ring when Botham Jean was executed in his own home while eating ice cream? Did it ring when they murdered George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery in broad daylight on the street? Did it ring when Breonna Taylor was accosted while sleeping? Did it ring on January 6th when white supremacists called themselves patriots at at the urging of their king, stormed the U.S. Capitol building? Did it ring when Amir Locke, after being startled awake on his cousin's couch, was shot and killed due to a no-knock warrant being served by SWAT? It happened all within 9 seconds. He was still wrapped in his blanket. And did it ring in May 2022, when 13 people were shot, 10 of them killed on a Saturday afternoon while grocery shopping, and the shooter didn't even sustain a scratch when handled by the cops? Did it ring during all of the times Black and brown babies were killed by police? Did it ring as a result of millions protesting and rioting in the streets? Did it ring? Did it ring? Did it ring? The ancestors are still watching, listening, waiting. The awkward silence that follows after hollow promises of those in power are so loud and clear that it's deafening, smothering, suffocating, anxiety-producing, to the point that many of us are now declaring that we can't breathe. It's been this way for centuries, cyclical, history repeating. But we did not plant those seeds watered by generations of tears and bleeding hearts. A guaranteed constant, it seems, the promise of new wounds and reopened scars. Yet, so many would hasten us to forget, saying that we are here now in the present, so neither one of us did experience the past. Trouble is, it's becoming increasingly difficult to tell the difference between the past and today. Kind of like the increasing disappearance of the separation between church and state. And while they try to water us down, to literally drown us out, wiping off the map, thriving Black towns, but soul and blood ties are the hardest to break down, kind of like our spirits. We know how to wade in the water to become new and strong again, and again, and again, and again. But that doesn't erase the wickedness of those deeds. You should thank your God that we are not vigilantes. Yet the fact remains that there will be no justice or no peace, no equality or freedom until white people are called and answered to no longer deny their reckoning. Because after all, freedom ain't free. No need for more educating or validating or waiting. It is time to truly embrace the 3 R's in order to move forward. Revelation, revolution, and reparations. And that time is now. Ring, ring, ring. Thank you.
Set the tone, y'all. Now I'm going to read these introductions as fast as possible so we can get to the good part. But I'm going to explain the good part. What you're going to be witnessing is a discussion between therapists. Just imagine this being that fly on the wall. What we always wanted to, when folks is rapping about what's going on in the community, what's going on in this nation, how they stand strong to each other. And so we can hear some of that. Then we're going to tie you in at the end part. Is that okay? All right. So I'm going to start off with my wife and introduce her first. Is that okay with y'all? All right. Michelle has a BS in Human Services from the University of Phoenix in Portland, Oregon, and an MSW from Portland State University. She has worked for over 15 years in the human services and mental health field. She is a holistic Afrocentric wellness practitioner providing culturally specific mental health services to the BIPOC community. Michelle applies a combination of anti-oppressive practice, liberation psychology, empowerment theories, and strengths perspective to inform her practice when working with families and community members. Her drive to understand the complexities of the world has led her to study African spirituality, meditation, Kemetic Reiki, Usi Reiki, astrology, apothecary, herbalism, among other things. Through her own physical health struggles, Michelle has gained a wealth of knowledge about herbal medicine and other natural and spiritual healing modalities. She is passionate about empowering individuals to make informed decisions not only about their mental, physical, and spiritual health, but their total lifestyle. Michelle is a Reiki master, sacred woman practitioner, and vibrational sound therapist. Welcome, Michelle. On the stage with Michelle, we have Vyshika M. Willis, is a licensed marriage and family therapist registered associate in the state of Oregon. She currently serves the Portland community focused on mental well-being and stability of the African diaspora as a mental health clinician. Vyshika also provides pseudo-education on various topics related to mental health and the Black community, locally and nationally, via her online platform, Black on the Couch. Her primary focus as a practitioner is rooted in a systemic and relational lens and framework. She's extremely passionate about bringing awareness to and lifting the voices of those who are unrepresented and underprivileged. Through her social media platform, she has curated conversations focused on awareness and the effectiveness of mental health, decreasing stigma and increasing the understanding of mental health as a resource in the Black community, providing a virtual space for discussion and education. Her private practice, Black on the Couch, will open soon, where she will provide mental health services, consulting, coaching, and wellness development. Let's welcome Vyshika. All right. Resmaa coaches leaders and provides people through suffering edge. His work focuses on making the invisible embodied and visible. Resmaa Menakem is a healer. Repeat that again. Resmaa Menakem is a healer, a longtime therapist, and a licensed clinician social worker who specializes in the healing of racialized trauma. He is also the founder of the Cultural Somatics Institute, a cultural trauma navigator, and a communal provocateur and coach. Resmaa is best known as the author of the New York Times bestseller, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, and as an originator and key advocate for systemic abolitionism, as embodying anti-racist practice of living and culture building. For 10 years, Resmaa co-hosted a radio show with former U.S. Congressman Keith Ellison on KMOJ FM in Minneapolis. He also hosted his own show, Resmaa in the Morning, on KMOJ. Resmaa has appeared on both The Oprah Winfrey Show and Dr. Phil as an expert on family dynamics, couples in conflict, and domestic violence. He has also been a guest on Charlamagne tha God's Comedy Central TV program, The God's Honest Truth, and on iHeartRadio's The Breakfast Club with DJ Envy. Resmaa has served as a director of counseling services for Tubman Family Alliance, a domestic violence treatment center in Minneapolis, the behavioral health director for African American Family Services in Minneapolis, a domestic violence counselor for Wilder Foundation, a divorce and family mediator, a social worker for Minneapolis Public Schools, a youth counselor, a community organizer, and a marketing strategist, whatever that word is. Strategist, yeah. From 2011 to 2013, Resmaa was a community care counselor for civilian contractors in Afghanistan, managing the wellness and counseling service on 53 U.S. military bases. As a certified military family life consultant, he has also worked with members of the military and their families on issues related to family living, deployment, and returning home. To schedule a free 15-minute somatic clinician. www.resmaa.com. Better than that, though, he is here, so Please welcome Resmaa. Restrooms are in the back, got water, coffee, cookies. If you need to take a break, go get some air. Come on back in. Won't cost you to get back in. So with that, I'll turn it over to y'all.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome. You know, when Latoya was speaking, I was looking around at these illustrations that are posted here, and I didn't really get a chance to read up on them, but I'm imagining that this is indicative of Portland's terror-telling story, like the Vanport floods. The protests that happened in 2020 and really continue to happen around the city. And so,
Could you speak up a little bit, please?
yes, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just speaking about the artwork here and it being indicative of the city we live in. And so, as we talk today, take a look at these pieces. As we're talking about like somatic abolitionism, I know I was feeling a lot of things while looking at these pictures, because this was not, you know, I know the Vanport floods was many years ago. However, we're in the area, right? And then the 2020 was just 2 years ago. Yeah.
So what I like to do is, because, you know, just to set the moment so that we can get our hearts, our bodies, and our minds right, I'm going to ask Brother Resmaa if he would recommend an exercise that we could do just to get ourselves grounded before we just get into it, you know?
Okay. So, well, if I do this, we'll probably launch into everything. So.
Absolutely.
All right. After more people. All right. So, a lot of my work, a lot of the work that I do revolves around giving people context. Okay? When we're talking about trauma, we're talking about historical trauma. When we're talking about intergenerational trauma, when we're talking about persistent institutional trauma, and then our own personal lived experiences, we're not talking about something that is small. We're talking about something that has weight to it, right? Context, and what happens is that in structures, those that are advantaged by the structure, the first thing that they want to do is decontextualize them, right? That's why you hear these types of stories around founding fathers and who the savages were and who the brutes were and who were worthy and who was discovered, right? And all of that is traumatizing, right? And because a lot of times bodies of culture experience that trauma, and we got to take care of our babies, and we're trying to make a better way, and we're trying to figure out what liberation looks like, right? So we have a tendency to override in order to get through stuff. That override can be decontextualized over time. And so what I want y'all to think about as you hear the three of us talking, I want you to think about, as you're hearing some of the things, what's happening in your body as you're hearing, right? And when I say this, a lot of times people think I'm talking about yoga or you know what I mean? I'm not talking about, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you begin to try and track what's happening in your body and you can't, stay there. Stay at the edge so you can see over time what might emerge from that as opposed to looking for the answer to something. Okay? So the reason why I'm saying that is that as we're talking, there's going to be expansion, there's going to be constriction, there's going to be this movement, there's going to be texture, there's going to be weight. And what I want you to begin to do is think about your feet. Just notice right now your feet. See if you can notice your feet inside of your shoes. Just that is enough. If you are able to notice it, now some people you might not be able to notice it. This is not about right and wrong. This is about curiosity. What is going on? Do my thoughts feed up at the notion of trying to notice myself being in my chair? Noticing my feet in my shoes. Noticing my spine on my chair. Some of us can't because stuff has happened to us. Or stuff has happened to the nervous systems that we were born into. Okay? And as you notice that, so I'm going to show you two things. So the first one is grounding. Grounding should not be this arduous thing. Some people can't ground. That's fine. Notice that. Be curious about that. We get so caught up sometimes in teaching people skills that we forget how to be with people. Y'all following me? This is really important. The next piece, because some of us come from, the next piece is that because some of us come from bodies that were raped for 250 years legally, or were genocided off of land, right? The ferality, that less than 3% of the population of this country is indigenous. Think about what I just said. Less than 3% of this country has indigenous people in it. Something happened and continues to happen. And when that stuff happens, it informs the nervous system. And so as you just heard me say that, something happened right now in your body. There was either a locking, a pushing, a speeding up of the cadence in terms of the images in your brain. Something happened. And so as we begin to talk, when that happens, one of the things I want you to do is to find the windows, the doors, and the exits. Look around and find those. When you come from bodies that have been genocided and raped and brutalized and enslaved, what happens is there becomes a locking down or a bracing in the hips, right? Because the hips there's a muscle in the hips called the psoas muscle. It's a mobilization muscle and an immobilization muscle, right? And so you may come from people who were brutalized or had to flee something. And now, because that's been decontextualized, you look at it as culture. Trauma decontextualizing a person can look like personality. Trauma decontextualized in a family can look like family traits. Trauma decontextualized in a people can look like culture. Paul. So now, you just heard me say that. Something began to move or collapse. Turn around, use your hips, find the exits, find the windows, find the doors. Find the exits and look over both shoulders. Slow it down. This is not an assignment. Now notice. now knows. When I'm working with black bodies and indigenous bodies and brown bodies, that's one of the first things we do, is start to work with the orientation and the disorientation. We live in a structure by which the white body deems and has deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies' humanity shall be measured structurally and philosophically. Pause. We live in a structure by which the white body deems and has deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies' humanity shall be measured philosophically and structurally. Paul. If you don't understand that, everything else will confuse you. If you don't understand that, everything else will confuse you by design. As we go through the rest of this time, when you notice stuff starting to happen, find the windows, the doors, and the exits. Okay?
So much. Thank you.
Good breath. Good breath.
So one of the things that I wanted to get right into is thinking about, you write a lot about white body supremacy rather than white supremacy. Whites.
So, I might make some people mad with this one, but I think they're recovered.
Go ahead, brother.
So we in a land of, like, I live in Minneapolis, right? I thought that was the white people factory, but Portland is
Somebody said that it's the white Atlanta.
Yeah, it's white. This many Birkenstocks in, like,
Come on, man.
So the reason why I say that is that one of the things that happens with progressive white folks and the kind of liberal-minded white folks is that they see things as episodes as opposed to structure. So I need to say that again. That one of the things that happens is that when you read My Grandmother's Hands or White Fragility, you think that's it. Once you have a book club, and you met with each other for more than 3 months, that you've arrived. And so I've watched this over 30 years, 35 years of doing this work. I've watched white folks do this thing where they show me their racial resume all the time, right? And tell me how much they're an ally, right? And so I started doing this thing where I started asking white folks, whenever they would come up, like we do a book signing, they come up and say they're an ally. And I say, okay, first of all, who are the people you come from? Like white folks love declarations of independence from other white folks, right? They love declaring that they're not the same as other white folks, right? And they believe that that's enough. And so one of the things that I have found is that when I ask white bodies, who are your people? Who are the people that when you die, they're going to bury you in a way that you have developed by being part of that culture? Where's the living embodied anti-racist culture that you ushered in? not ideas, culture. And so the reason why I say white body supremacy as opposed to white supremacy is that when you say the term white supremacy, most folks start nodding like, yes, that's a bad thing, right? But it's an intellectual nod. It is a cognitive nod. It is not an embodied nod. And what I mean by that is that the white body has all of these kind of off-ramps to not be white, right? I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. And so one of the things that I decided to do when I started writing my grandmother's hands was try and cut off as many fucking off-ramps. Right? And one of them was saying the term white supremacy and giving them a cognitive off-ramp. Saying white body supremacy talks about it as within a context. That's why I say that whiteness hasn't always been here. But once it got here, white people socked it up with a biscuit. Right? It was, and I believe a lot of that has to do with the brutality. Remember, most white bodies in this room are descended from white bodies that were fleeing something. I want y'all to understand. Most of the white bodies in this room are descended from white bodies that were fleeing something that never got dealt with. And then elite white bodies gave y'all an opportunity not to have to deal with it. So you take all of that rage that should have been directed at your king and the people that were turning white women into witches. They gave you the black and indigenous body to blow all of that stuff through. And so the reason why I say white body supremacy is I want white folks to understand that this is not about good and bad. White bodies love the binary of good and bad. They love things like, I'm good and kind, right? They think kindness is the same thing as ushering in a living, embodied anti-racist culture, right? And what I try to say to white folks particularly is that I'm glad, I hope you are kind. I hope you're a good white person. I do. I don't want you to spit in my soup. Right? I don't want you to call me the N-word. Right? I don't want that. But that is inadequate to the brutality that we have to experience every day. If your goodness is it is inadequate. That's the piece. So white bodies in particular, now I know you asked one damn question.
Take your time, brother.
So here's the thing. There's a spoken word artist, white person, and I heard them on YouTube. And one of the things that they said, we're talking to white folks when they said, my white brothers and sisters, you are so busy looking for the shark that you don't realize when it comes to white supremacy, you're in the water. So you're ingesting all of these pieces when you're looking for the bad ones or the good ones or all these different, and that stops you from creating culture. You are not going to get out of this through strategy. It is impossible. It's one of the things when people that have been in my training, I say white bodies is going to take 9 to 12 generations before y'all know what the hell racism is. On a visceral sense, collectively, white bodies have no agility or acuity when it comes to race. I'm not talking about individual. Collectively, because you have not had to navigate the ravages of it. And don't come up to me and tell me you're poor, or you're gay, or you're trans. Please don't do that. Please don't do it. I had a white dude about 2 years ago interviewed me, and he comes up and goes, "Resmaa, I love your book. I love it. I read your book in a weekend." I said, "Dude, you got absolutely nothing out of that book. It takes at least 8, 9, 10 months to get through that book, right?" And the reason why I'm saying that is that there's this performative thing, right, that bodies of culture are so tired of. They're so tired. Because when you come and say something to us, we already know you don't have a culture steeped in a living, embodied, anti-racist ethos. You don't have that. It does not exist. So when you come to me with your white gaze, G-A-Z-E, when you come to me telling me your ideas about something, the first thing that happens to me is I believe you're dangerous.
Right.
When you try to convince me that you're a different white body than another white body, that tells me you're dangerous. And you think you have no concept of what you're communicating because you haven't developed it. You haven't tempered and conditioned your body to navigate the vibratory things that are happening between us. So I know that was one question. I hope that got to someone.
Yes. But what you were saying, you were talking about the pain, and you talked about clean pain and dirty pain.
Yeah.
So can you kind of clarify that and let's discuss that?
So raise your...
Your live stream. You want live stream?
Oh, do I need to?
Let me try to.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Resmaa's got people, y'all, around the country just tapping in, so he needs his content, y'all. We give him that piece.
Sorry, y'all. That's enough. Just put it back there. We good. We good. I ain't going to do all that. So have you ever been in a relationship with somebody where not
That was a trick question. Come on, man. Just set me up.
been in a relationship? So, have you ever been in a relationship with somebody, y'all, and you're in a relationship with them, and you just can't get enough of them, and all your friends are asking you, why? Sufficient answer, but you know you can extricate yourself from them. You ever done it? And in you, you know this person ain't good for me. Right? You ever been in that type of relationship? And you stay in it? That's dirty, man. That's dirty.
Look around.
Yeah. That's right. Real talk. Listen, we all know that. We all know that dirty stuff, that stuff that keeps gnawing at us, right? Gnawing is an important part of adult development. The gnawing can turn, people think that information is knowledge. Gnawing is knowledge. Gnawing pushes you up against your adult developmental edges and asks you what you gonna do now. And some of us say, what I'm gonna do is stay with this person. That's what I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna make sure anybody that don't like it, they stay away from it. Even if I love it, I'm gonna stay away from it, right? That's dirty. And we all are willing to do dirty and choose dirty at times, right? But there's another type of pain and discomfort that is also important, and that's clean pain. Clean pain is that when you finally are sitting there and you go, I'm done, and you act like it. When they call, you don't pick up the phone. You turn on your Prince, grab your Marlowe, and you cry, and you rock, and you cuss, and you shake, and you keep doing it. And you reach back out to those people you said, stop talking about them like that. And you reach back out, and you go spend some time with your mama or your uncle or your dad, and you don't pick up the call. It's cleaner and has the ability to create more capacity in ways that dirty does not. And as a culture, this culture, this America is steeped in dirt. It was born out of dirt. The organizing structure in this country is not the Declaration of Independence. It is not the Constitution. The primary organizing structure of this country was the plantation.
Come on.
It organized white people. I'm not talking about the enslaved. Black people were never slaves. We were enslaved. They enslaved doctors, nurses, farmers. The plantation is what you see this country devolving into. 2 days, 3 days before the Roe versus Wade was, they did that gangster ass move. 2 days before that, they loosened guns. A couple days before that, they said you have no right to Miranda. You don't think they're coming for gay men? You don't, listen, the rollback started 100 years ago. The rollback started 50 years ago. The reason why they can't get a Voting Rights Act through is because they're too caught up in the rollback. The race question, let me say this not the last, but let me say the race question in this country, y'all have to understand this. This is why I talk about this not as episode, but as structure. The race question in this country has always been a species question. That's the part we miss. We think when we talk about race, we're only talking about the pigmentocracy. The race question in this country has always been a species question. When they started talking, when Europeans started to begin to talk about race, they talked about it as species. I'm talking about pre-us. They talked about it as a race of dog, a race of cat, a race of fish. That's the way they talked about race. You understand what I mean? Once they started talking that shit about manifest destiny and doctrine of discovery, and they started running up against us and indigenous people, right? Then what they did was, because they're so feeble, what they did was said, oh, if there is a difference in pigmentation, that must be a difference in species. So they started taking that idea and graphing it over pigmentation. They created a whole science on that. Are y'all understand what I'm saying? That idea has been woven in and around every institution of this country. Everyone. The medical institution, the law institution, the science. You understand what I mean? And then that idea got transported to other Europeans. And so that became decontextualized and seen as standard. Y'all follow what I'm saying? If you don't understand this, everything else will confuse you. So when I'm talking about pain, and when Sis just asked me about clean pain and dirty pain, what I'm saying is that we have to start to begin to develop ways of going through the clean pain. We don't get a choice as adults between pain and no pain. If the reverse of Roe versus Wade did not help you understand the difference between clean pain and dirty pain, that just your protest, we have to resist and build at the same time. We have to get that peace in us. We have to resist the seductive quality of white body supremacy at the same time that we're building something else that's more sustainable and has more capacity. This has no more capacity, but it has teeth. Am I making sense? And we get so caught up in this right now, this Roe versus Wade thing right now is an opportunity. Them not being serious about the Voting Rights Act is an opportunity. But it's an opportunity for us to condition and temper ourselves to be able to develop the grit and stamina that we're going to need to pass down to our babies. And right now, that doesn't exist. Wait a minute, let me say that different. It does exist. But what it takes to get there is us getting our reps in. What it takes to get there is conditioning and temper. And I know bodies of culture have experience with this. Black, brown, and indigenous bodies have experience with this. White bodies collectively have no experience with this. None. None. Don't come up to me during the book thing and tell me about your damn church. Do not. I'm telling you. Do not. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying to white bodies, get together with two other white bodies. Don't ask your friend Shaniqua to come from your Don't ask the indigenous sister to come from your Get together with two other white bodies and say we're committed to each other. One of us is going to bear the other. And we're going to study and we're going to read. We've all been through a mass education system. Both embodied, intellectually, and philosophically. Okay? What makes you think you're going to get from underneath this without a mass re-education structure? What makes you think just your good idea? You have to create something. Two questions.
So as we're talking about language is very powerful in terms of terminology. Absolutely. And so because we're doing a lot of relearning, how we navigate this experience that we're having in our bodies. So can you explain like racial versus racialized trauma?
Yeah.
And then bodies of culture even versus bodies of color.
Yeah. Yes. So there are all of these trapdoors in our language. You know what I mean? And you have to consciously you have to constantly change the language, both individually and communally, to give yourself room. That's it. Like some of the people that have studied with me, I had one sister. She was getting her MSW, right? But before she was in her MSW, she was training with me online, right? So there's a certain way that we talk and a certain way that we get down, right? So she go into one of her classes after she gets in her MSW, and she starts saying, bodies and culture. Mm. She didn't ask for permission. She said, I've been around people and this is how we talk. This is how we talk. Right? White professor came up to her halfway through and said, you know, in here we say bodies of people of color. Mm. Thought for a minute. She nodded. She brought that back to the community. She said, this is what's going on. And we held her. We rocked with her. She knew she had people. You understand what I mean? Did nobody say, you go back there and you tell them this? No, people said, pause. Work with that energy, that historical stuff that's coming. Work with the intergenerational stuff that's coming. And we're going to hold you and witness you while you do it. Right? We didn't have to say it. She went back. And she said, bodies and culture. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't ask for a debate. She's not going to debate. Because this is who she is and who she's starting to become. So, bodies of culture, really for me, is about a reclamation of that tried to be thwarted and ripped from us through land and colonization and rape. Right? It is a reclaiming of my sense and my time to the very first representation of humanism on this planet, a black woman.
Come on.
Right? So bodies of culture is a reclaiming of that lineage. You understand what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Tied to creation itself. Right? And so for me...
Cell phone, please. Thank you.
For me, body of culture is about reclaiming my humanity that this structure tried to beat out of me. It's still there, but the thwarting energy, remember, when we're talking about trauma, we're talking about an energy. When I say energy, I'm not talking about crystals. I'm talking, don't come up to me talking to me. If you want crystals out, that's cool. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about energy the way that Einstein talked about. Einstein said energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but it can't be manipulated, it can't be thwarted, it can't be, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And this rabbit pharaoh system is thwarted. It thwarts emergence. Emergence is the constant. Right? The way that I talk about emergence being tied to creation itself is that once you work to thwart it, right, over time, the emergence will find a way. Over time, right? But you have to condition your body to be able to work with the emergence, right? And a lot of times what happens is that we invite the emergence in too quick. We have conditioned and tempered our bodies to be able to handle 400 years. Mm. You understand what I mean? You ever try to talk with a white person about race? 400 years comes into the room like that.
Come on.
And we keep trying to have these things like DEI and all that shit. Let's get into it. We're going to talk about this. And have no idea the level of carnage that comes into the room. Are y'all tracking with y'all? I need y'all to hear me. But this stuff weathers and withers the body. We're talking about epinephrine. We're talking about cortisol. And you think you getting some training around implicit bias is going to work that. Right? So bodies of culture is about reclaiming those pieces that through the structure try to be ripped from my body, my heart, right? The reason why I say white bodies is because, number one, this is a subject. So number one, it just irritates the shit out of white folks when I say it. They get beside themselves when I say body of culture, and then I say white folks or white bodies.
But they made it up.
But they made it up. That's what I mean. That's why I love saying that shit, because it plays with the energy.
Yes.
I'm not going to allow you to blow that through me, but I want you to sit with that shit. Work with it. Let the quaking happen. Right? But do that shit with each other. You understand what I'm saying? Don't blow that shit through me. Right? That's why. It's because and that's what I mean by the 400 years. It's so right there. The same energy. Let me say this. Like, we're all psychotherapists, right? So one of the things that through all of my training, most of my training did not involve the next thing I'm getting ready to say. Okay? We were taught that when people come to us with a problem, that our job was to help them get rid of the problem. Right? And what I've discovered now is that our job is not to get rid of it. Our job is to help people take that energy that is now at this point used to burn them and fry them up, and take that same energy so it can be metabolized and used for the liberation. That's right.
Yes.
And the way we've been trained, they don't train us that way. They don't train us to find the assets first. If you're working with people, if you're working, like one of the things I tell white therapists, if you're working with a body of culture and you don't understand what their people's assets are, their aspirations, and then what are the structural, the historical, the intergenerational, the persistent institutional, and then the personal stigmas and structural barriers. If you don't start with the barriers first. Start with what are the assets of the people? What are the aspirations of the people? And then what are the structural barriers that are getting in the fucking way? That's your job as a healer. That's your job as a therapist. Ain't none of us been trained like that.
That's right.
Some of us come to it by error and by this shit that y'all keep trying to get me to do, like cognitive behavioral and all this. And I'm not saying that I'm not bagging on it. I'm saying it's limited. I'm saying it's limited. I'm gonna say one more thing. No, I'm not. So check this out. We, right, black folks are relational people. Right? That's just how we come on the planet. We're relational people. This idea of relationship, even in our professions, right, is so paramount and important to us. Like when we get trained and we can't relate to people, it does something to us. Like it does something to us. So the idea that you can do this work and not figure out how to be with people, like be in the room and hold them. I'm not talking physical. There are 7 intelligences that I work, right? And we call them, in our work, we call them Vymbasi. Vymbasi, right? Vymbasi is V-I-M-B-A-S-I, right? Vymbasi stands for, V stands for vibes and vibrations, right? Vibes and vibration is a literal intelligence. The body is a receiver, an antenna, and a amplifier. Right? When something happens, we experience it vibratorily. Right? I'm talking literal energy, y'all. I'm not talking, okay? I'm talking literal energy, that there is there's vibrations happening, right? And the body is an amazing amplifier and receiver of that, right? But it will destroy you if you haven't conditioned and tempered your body to know what the hell it is. And so, vibes and vibration is one. Images, thoughts, dreams, cognition is a literal intelligence. Meaning making is an intelligence. Behavior and urges, whether it's expressed urge or thwarted urge, is a literal intelligence. Affect and emotionality is a literal intelligence. Sensation, right, is a literal intelligence. Imagination is a literal intelligence. Okay? In this structure, the only thing that ranks as intelligence is cognition. And if that's the case, it crowds out the other 6. And as people, and particularly as Black, Indigenous, and brown bodies, we have to reclaim those intelligences and act like they're intelligences. That's right.
Yes, yes.
That's right. Black women, brown women know vibes. I'm married to a Black woman. That's right. But there's a thing in the body, and I believe some of it has been conditioned by the experience that Black women have had, and I believe some of it is conditioned by the experience of being tied to the very first expression of humanness on this planet. Okay? There is an old piece around vibes and vibration. Right? And we have to hone that. This is the culture building piece. You have to begin to act like that is something. When a Black woman does what she just did to me, that is a whole language. That is a grunting, moaning. You can be in a crowded room and hear a Black woman go, and you go. You know what I mean? But we act like that's a throwaway. We act like humming is a throwaway. My grandmother used to hum. The hum, listen, the hum, there's a nerve that comes out of the brainstem called the vagal nerve. It hits the face, it hits the chest, most of it lands in the belly, it goes in and around the heart. It's why you have gut reactions. The gut was one of the chest has bone and muscle, right? So it's protecting the heart and the lungs. The brain has bone and muscle. The stomach, however, the way that it protects itself is by constricting. And some of us come from nervous systems that have been constricted for so long that we have a sense that that's the way we're supposed supposed to be. Right? So that piece, this piece around how you begin to hone and work with that stuff individually and communally. Because a lot of people right now are hearing what I'm saying. We say, they already got their assignment. They left a half hour. They already know what to do, right? What they ain't going to do is do that with another body. Because when you do it with another body, you're being asked in a different way. So these types of things like humming and rocking, oh, I forgot. So the vagal nerve comes out, hits the face. How many of y'all raise your hand got children? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you got more than one child? Raise your hand. Right. Keep your hands up. How many of you know the one child that you got that's going to lie about everything? For no reason. Right? Put your hands out. And you can tell before they start lying. Now, how do you know that? How do you know when you ask, in my case, Tezra, did you, and you start, dude, stop. He didn't even say nothing yet, and I would stop. You know what I mean? Well, one of the reasons is that the vagal nerve, one of the first places that the vagal nerve hits is in the face. And when you're around another nervous system over an amount of time, you begin to pick up on the subtle changes and shifts in the face. It's why you can call your mom, and you're talking to your mom or somebody that you love, and all of a sudden you go, "What's wrong?" They say nothing. You say, "Nah." Right? That's because the vagal nerve hits the throat, and it constricts and opens. Right? That is an ancient knowledge, is what I'm just saying. That is creation itself. We have to reclaim those pieces. Right? As intelligence. We have to reclaim image as intelligence. Shifts in meaning making and discernment as intelligence. I'm not, some of y'all are hearing, I'm not saying strategy. I'm not saying strategy. Some of y'all can't help it. You can't help me hear that I'm talking strategy. I'm not talking strategy. I'm talking culture building. You have to start low and slow. Otherwise, you won't have the stamina and the grit. You won't understand nuance. I was watching the thing on YouTube, and it was an interview with Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson was sitting there talking. The guy talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, you know." And then the guy asked him. The guy said, "I got a question I want to ask you." But yeah, he said, what was one? I said, he said, if you could boil down to one thing that you learned from Gus. Gus was his all time. If you could learn one thing, like boil it all the way down, what's the one thing that you just carry all the way through the rest of your life? Oh, he said, "Oh, that's easy." He said, I was in the gym one day, and he said, Gus loved me. He said, Gus would stop and just talk to me and say things to me. He said, Gus told me early on I was going to be a champion. He said he could see it. He said, but one day I was in the gym and Gus goes, "Come here." So Gus is talking to him and he said, "There is no doubt in my mind that you will be the heavyweight champion of the world someday." He said, "But if you don't understand this one thing, you will not be heavyweight champion." And he said, there are certain things you know you should be doing that you're not doing. He said, and until you start doing those things like you love them, you will never be champion. listen to the wisdom. He's saying, you're going to have to do the thing. Every time, and I think about it like this. Every time I do the thing that I don't want to do, that I know I should be doing, every time I do it like I love it, I take one more step towards my liberation. How many of us can stay with that shit over and over and over and over and over and over? That's what we're talking about. How do you begin? And because see, what I just said is time. There's no doubt in my mind that everyone who is listening to me, you know that what I'm talking about is my purpose. This what you see and what you hear in me is tied to why I'm here. Right? It took me 30 years to figure this out. 40 years to figure it out. Do y'all understand what I mean? I know I look good. I'm old. It's cool. So, it took me, right? But that was it's worth it now. You see me. If I wasn't getting paid to do this, I'd be doing it. I just started getting paid. This is 22. I just started getting paid at 20. Wow. This ain't right. I've been doing private practice and running nonprofits and stuff like that. I just started getting paid. I like it. I know, it's all right. But a lot of times when it comes to liberation building, we don't do this work first. This work develops the glue. This is why we get together like the Roe versus Wade thing happened, and everybody in Portland is just mad and in their houses, reading my grandmother's hand, cooking sourdough bread, eating kale. Taking out the Black Lives Matter sign and putting it right back in the front yard.
Come on, man.
Madness. I've been to Minneapolis. But you see what I mean? That is not sustainable. That's not glue. That's not culture. It will peter out. Who are you people? Who's going to bury you? White folks have never had to ask that question. As it relates to culturally. Who am I having babies with? Who am I educating? How am I educating my white babies? So they don't grow up at 17 and go into a black-owned supermarket and shoot old black women. And point the gun at a white boy and say, I'm sorry, and then go to the old black woman. Y'all are raising that. White women, y'all are raising that. Stop acting like, that happened. That got everything to do with you. This is other language. This is why I don't say white privilege no more. Stop saying white privilege. I said it. You say it, white people go, yep, white privilege. White privilege. Whole conference is on it. White privilege. No culture. I say white advantage. In a structure by which the white body deems and has deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies' humanity shall be measured structurally and philosophically, in a structure like that, it is not a privilege to be in a white body. It is a distinct advantage. It is an advantage. It is not a privilege. Those Africans who were trying to get the hell out of Ukraine, and these white folks who weren't even Ukrainians said, get your ass up, and then the military backed it, that's an advantage, not a privilege. Are you understand what I'm saying? We have to change our language. You know these rabid-ass dogs ain't gonna change the language. They ain't got nothing to do with us. We have to change the way we get down. You understand what I mean? These pieces around continuing to use the oppressor's language and not emerge and evolve our own. And I'm not talking about the Korean, I'm not talking about Kemetic language, I'm not talking about learning Swahili, I'm not Swahili, I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about something even slower, more interrogated, more capacity oriented.
About 5 minutes ago.
Look, I know my limitations.
It's true. You were talking about intergenerational trauma. In the book, I was wondering, can you kind of just explain the difference between intergenerational trauma and generational curse?
Oh, I hate that. Generational curse.
I'm with you, so.
Listen. I've been hearing that so much from Black people's mouths lately. And I understand what it is. It really is an expression of the pain that we've been through. That's what we're trying to say, right? But it backs us into this idea that we're cursed. Not that somebody did something to us and continues to do something to us. You see what I mean? You're not cursed. You're not cursed. You're not cursed. We are not cursed. We are not cursed. Something happened and continues to happen. You just haven't interrogated it enough to figure out what that is. Slow it down and let's interrogate it. I don't come from a cursed people. I come from a people that were genocided and raped and colonized and land thefted. And a pigmentocracy was developed around them. That's who I come from. I don't come from a cursed people. We're not cursed. And every time we say it, it reinforces that pharaohness, that trauma, that grief. And I don't want white folks don't get to gaze at that no more.
Oh, say it.
They don't get to hear me say that no more. They don't get that. White folks have proven that they don't have my best interest at heart. I need to stop acting like, I need to start listening to what they're telling me. We are not cursed. We have been intergenerationally, historically traumatized. Think about it like this. If when I was 7 years old, I was sexually assaulted, right, by a neighbor. And sis, I would venture to say that if you was a therapist back then, and I came into your office, and I said, I was sexually assaulted, right? You would say, you would take care of it. You would figure out how to take care of it, right? And you would tend to the wounds, and you would tend to it, and you would hold it. You would be there, right? And that would be helpful to you, right? And because of that, I probably would stand a better chance of healing through and not getting stuck in it. Okay? But what if I never had any tending to that? And now I come into your office at 50 years old, and I've organized my sense of self around the energy of it, around the vibe of it, around the sensation of it. You guys understand what I mean? Now, it looks like my personality. Right? But what if I'm talking about black women and men on a plantation that for 250 years were legally raped in order to create a product that was their children? The average age of rape on a plantation was 9 years old, of men and women. For 250 years, there was no exit. If you stayed, you were brutalized. If you left, you were brutalized. What happened to us did not happen to us individually, it happened to us collectively. So only developing an individual response to a collective horror is inadequate. So if I come from a people who, and when I say this, I'm not saying this is our lot. I'm saying the structural barriers and the structural stigmas and the structural things that were put in place that happened to my people. My people had to override and survive that when you know your child is going to get raped, when you know that you're going to get raped, when you know that it is a distinct possibility of getting raped and brutalized, how does a people organize itself in order to survive that? And so now by the time it gets to us, it's just vibes. It's just feelings. And then we think something's wrong with us. And so when I'm talking about embodiment, I'm saying we have to work that. Not all at one time. We have to work those pieces. And so when a black woman comes into my office and says that she's been dealing with vaginal fibroid, or not vaginal, uterine fibroid, and I don't understand the context, I start trying to give her tips for, has she tried this doctor, has she tried that remedy, has she tried this? But if I could say to her, sis, when you just said throat choke, first thing that popped in my head was, I'm wondering how the historical is showing up in your person. And I leave it. And I leave space. I don't know what's going to emerge from that. But I know whatever it is, it's going to be us working it together. I don't care if it takes 12 years. Me and her are going to work this. We're going to rock this. So her context becomes expanded and not thinking that her body is defective. Because it is not. And it never has been. But we've ingested the notions of it. And that operates in the background. And many times, when we're working with these bodies, we don't understand that. We want to give tips and ideas and not know how to be. That's why I said we have to slow it down and create the culture, because the being comes out of the culture. It's emerging. I call this emergent scholarship, not academic, emergent. We are more than our people, and then we let that inform us, right? We work with the energies, so what already is can begin to emerge, but that happens as their bodies become more conditioned and tempered. One of the processes that I talk about is the idea that when I talk about somatic evolution, I say that so when you're going through this process, one of the things that will happen is that you will develop a thickened skin. Right? This emergent embodied work is you have to develop a thick skin, because everybody and their mama gonna tell you wrong, and you going the wrong way, and this ain't gonna help, and that ain't gonna do it, and this ain't gonna that. And you have to keep going, especially if it's tied to your purpose, especially if it's tied to your ancestors. And when I say ancestors, I'm not just talking about linear ancestors, or linear ancestors, right? And lineage ancestors. I'm also talking about the earth, animals, air. I'm talking about that as ancestry, primordial ancestry, right? And so these pieces, I just lost my train of thought, but I'll come back to it. What was I talking about?
You were talking about like having a thick skin.
Oh, thick skin. Yep, you got it. Thick skin. So thick skin. So you have to develop a thick skin. You have to develop, and in the process of conditioning and tempering, a fortified mindset. Right? Over time. Right? Not because you read my grandmother's hand, but because you've been vulnerable with other bodies and you're developing a glue with each other over time. Right? You develop a fortified mindset. And the last piece that you develop is a malleable heart. Right? Some of us develop thick skin, fortified mindset, and a hardened heart. And you've been with people like that are down for the movement and down for liberation, but there's a hardness in their heart. Right? That's vibratory. That's not on high, Jesus, Yahweh. That ain't, sprinkling, that's not that. That's not bestowal. That's an emergent understanding. Right? And so the malleable heart is the hardest piece. We can develop thick skin, fortified mindset, but having that malleable heart, that lightened heart, that's a harder piece than developing the hardened heart. Do you understand what I mean? Yes. And so everything I'm saying is about culture development, not strategy. Is that good?
I really liked about I've been saying a lot lately about not being defective. I had mentioned it, today to some women at a table that I was working with. And I hear you say that, and it reminds me when I tap into some things for myself, that I am not defective.
So fraudulence and imposter is built into the structure for Black women in bodies and other bodies of culture. This is structural. Yeah. Fraudulence and imposter is built in to the structure as it relates to indigenous women's bodies, Black women's bodies, brown women's bodies. Do you understand what I mean? It's also built into the structure for white women. Well, white women are so close to the oppressor that they don't examine it. They are advantaged and disadvantaged at the same time, right? And so this idea, what did I just say again?
So it was.
This is the way my brain works, y'all, so deal with it.
It's the therapist. It's really what it is.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about imposter.
Yeah, so the imposter pieces, the imposter fraudulence pieces are structural pieces. We seem to think of it like when somebody comes into our office and they're dealing with imposter and fraudulent pieces, we tend to think of it only in the personal realm. It's not. Listen, in a structure by which the white body deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies' humanity shall be measured, your fraudulence is baked into the cake. Off top, before you land on the planet, that fraudulence is wearing your mama's nervous system, wearing it out. Off top, that fraudulence is wearing the sperm in your dad's penis out, and his balls out. It's wearing it out. That's what it changes epigenetically. By the time you come on the planet, you have notions of what's safe and not safe, and you don't even know where the hell it came from. It's not just the personal realm. That fraudulence is built in. The white money, land-owning white man is the supreme standard. That's why they keep trying to go back there. And everything else is a deviance from the standard. That's why they don't care about getting rid of Roe versus Wade, because they don't give a shit about your white-ass body either. But you keep trying to act like you keep trying to deal with them cordially. You keep trying to deal with your white husband, your white brother, your white uncle. You keep trying to deal with that in a cordial way. And it's vicious what they're doing. What the Supreme Court has been doing for the past couple of weeks and couple of months is vicious. But now that it's been vicious to white women, now you want to question it. And black women have been telling you to question this since the 1800s. Now you want to be shocked. They don't give a shit about you. Their organizing structure is the plantation. The one white man who had dominion over everybody else's body. Notice, let me tell you what will not be repealed. Yeah, y'all wait, man. Keep saying that. You know what ain't gonna be repealed? The Virginia versus Loving.
Yeah. Yep.